Are we ready?
Gotta get up, move your body and press play. Gotta get up, run, hurry, and hit his tape. Gotta get up, a new story is headed your way. Gotta this is up. Conversations with Jay.
Hello. We are back for another exciting conversation. Today we have a very special guest. She's a dedicated student affairs professional, a managing director of a nonprofit, and a certified sound healer. Arianna's personally been a part of my life since the day I moved into my dorm my first year of college. Arianna's grace, dedication, and intelligence has personally impacted me in my life throughout my collegiate journey and still to this day. So I am so eternally grateful for her to be here today. Welcome, Dr. Arianna Deans.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jalen. I'm so excited to be here and have
Of
this
course.
conversation.
I am too. Thank you so much for coming, Arianna.
Yeah.
How are we feeling today?
Good.
Good?
It's a little rainy, but it's good.
It's good, yes. Thank you for joining
Of
us.
course.
Arianna, you have a packed resume. You're a very accomplished individual.
Yes.
Tell me how all of these things kind of collided into one.
Ooh, collided is a good phrase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, where do you want me to start?
Let's start. You're a student affairs
Yeah,
professional. You're a doctor
yeah,
and a sound healer.
yes.
Tell me, maybe these things kind of catapulted off of one another.
Yeah. So I guess in regards to I guess we'll start kind of younger. So I always had a passion for music. I was not the best musician in a sense. So I
Mm-hmm.
I played a lot of different instruments.
Okay.
Wasted probably a lot of my parents' money,
You know.
but it happens.
Okay.
I did piano, I did violin, I was of course in choir, and so um, nothing really like stood out of like, oh, I really want to do this for the rest of my life. Fast forward to I went to school at NYU, studied education, and that was my first introduction into like wellness practices, which is crazy to think as like a 22-year-old learning about like meditation and yoga and spiritual practice at that age when I had gone through a lot before that time period.
Yeah.
And so for me, I ended up working at a meditation studio because I was a student and I could not afford classes. And so I went there and said, is there any opportunities that you have here? They're like, yeah, you can work the front desk. And I worked the front desk every Saturday early in the morning.
Oof.
This is all before the New Yorkers get up.
Okay.
I was opening the meditation studio and getting free classes. And I remember one day we had someone not show up to a sound bath. And so my boss at the time said, hey, do you want to sit in the sound bath? I was like, yes, I've been wanting to do this. I heard so many great things about it. And it's such a unique practice because it's not guided. The sounds kind of guide your own practice, which
Mm.
is interesting to me. We probably talk more about this. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I sat in, I just went into this outer body experience. It was something that I had never experienced before in a meditation class, but I knew instantly this is what I want to do.
Mm.
Like I just felt that moment. Like, you know, when you have your passion and your heart kind of aligns with it, it's like you crave it. It's like you have to do it. Like that is your daily practice. And I knew instantly, okay, how do I get involved in this? What does certificate programs look like? What instruments do I need to be purchasing? And it just became such a healing moment for me. And now I'm able to give that healing experience to others. And so, yeah, and it's great because with sound healing, it's such an energy driven practice.
Yeah.
And so, of course, there's instruments that require some, some practice more than others.
Okay.
But I think because I've been doing it for such a long time that I've now mastered that skill. And I love that each of my sound baths or sound healings are so unique to the person
Mm-hmm.
and so unique to me as a facilitator. So every time you come to a sound bath, you're never going to hear the same instrument. You're never going to hear the same style. It's never going to be the same. And I think that's what I love most about the practice. And so, yeah, so really kind of transition, with this practice, I was on LinkedIn and I wanted another job. I was like, okay, I really want to do something that's different, kind of outside of my student affairs arena. And it just happened that I was looking at diversity roles and this role popped up at the Composed Diversity Collective. And I was doing some research in the organization. I said, wow, okay, they talk about equity and being social justice warriors in the field of composing. This sounds like something that I like to do in general.
Yeah.
Diversity work is important for me. And so I had submitted my resume maybe like months before, didn't think anything of it, and then randomly just got a call like, hey, do you want to do an interview? And I was like, oh my gosh. Wait, I was like, when did I apply to this position? I was like, I kind of forgot. when did this happen? And they're like, yeah, we saw your resume, you fit well. Of course, a lot of the role is organization,
Yeah.
working with different industry folks. And so, of course, I never have been in that space, but I do have a degree in mass media. So I understood, how maybe things work as you're shifting into production or how music is being incorporated into films and TV. So I knew that aspect, but working now with composers is so unique and different because they really, so when I think about myself, people always say, well, do you consider yourself as a composer? I say no because, yes, in a sense, right? I'm composing instruments and music, but the work that I'm seeing my colleagues do and the folks that I'm managing for is so different and so unique. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm always amazed every time I go to work, just hearing their stories and seeing, when they say, oh, picture to score, when they're getting a picture that they're scoring for, I'm like, how do we even get to that place?
Yeah.
Like this was a love scene and we got into this really emotional moment. So that's just really unique. So that's kind of how I went from, and I feel like the music piece is following me now that I'm in it.
Yes.
And so, which is a blessing because music, I think, connects us all as humans and as people. So I think that's important to have that lens. But also, it's a creative space, and I hadn't had that in a long time. Of like, I just need a space that's not so rigid with students' concerns and student needs and parent concerns and parents' needs.
Yeah.
And it was nice to be like, okay, what is a creative space look like? And now that I've been there for almost over a year, it's a blessing to see that when people take notes and compose it into full songs, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, you see the beautiful experiences that you have with people, but then also it's like there is a collective that we're all bridging together and it's around this art form. So
Yeah, I think that's so interesting, especially starting out young. Like you said, you explored different instruments
yeah.
because this passion was there. Maybe you didn't find it then with the
Definitely
piano,
did.
but you found it eventually
Yeah.
and kind of exploring what a meditation studio looks like
Yeah.
and then letting that kind of step into this next version of it of you working for this nonprofit
Yeah.
and then having a sound healing practice
Yeah.
yourself. I think that's really interesting. How does all that then kind of tie into this doctor program that you were in?
Yeah. So I knew that I wanted to get a doctorate at a young age. So probably at 5 years old, I was telling people, "Oh, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor." A lot of people probably heard, "Oh, she's going to be a physician, work in the medical field." That never crossed my mind. I knew I wanted to be a doctor, but I did not want to go into medicine.
Okay.
So I knew that even at 5, that that's
Right.
not the doctor I
She
want to
knew that
be.
she wanted to be a doctor and what kind of doctor she wanted to be at 5 years
Yes,
old.
yes.
Yes.
Just not the one that requires, because I just didn't want the pain. I just didn't want to burden that of like
Right.
having to tell someone a horrible situation or having to, you know, do surgery. So I knew that was not in my path. But when I came across this program at USC, I instantly knew that it was different because it was in social work.
Mm-hmm.
And I had friends over the years say, "Oh my gosh, you would be a great therapist. Have you ever considered, being a therapist?" And I'm always the friend that anytime you need advice, relationships, parents, friends, I'm the one that you come to get
I've
advice.
gone to her.
Yes. And so I was like, okay, well, I don't need a social work degree to get this doctorate.
Yeah.
So, let me just apply and see what happens. And with the program, you create it's practicum based, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in student affairs, we're able to utilize a lot of practice in the work that we're doing when it comes to programs and initiatives. So it wasn't too far off to what I was currently doing.
Yeah.
And so with this program, it allowed me to create something from the ground up, but still embed in all of the things that I love. So around sound healing, around student impact, around support networks, around sense of belonging. So I think it was the ideal program for me. I still, in the back of my mind, think maybe a PhD later on in life. You never know. Just because I fell in love with research through this process,
Mm-hmm.
and I think research is so important, especially when I think about the research that's not out there around sound healing and sound meditation, the benefits around it and how it can impact young people. You hear yoga classes, right? And it's like, okay, there's a certain type of person that pops into a Google search when you say yoga, when you put in yoga.
Yes.
And a lot of times it's not folks that look like us.
No.
And so for me, it's important to say, okay, why is that? Why is it not happening?
Yeah.
But sound healing is a whole nother avenue. When you Google sound healing, rarely do we ever either in classes that they have photos, have folks that look like us, or also facilitators of the practice.
Yeah.
And so for me, I knew even getting into this, I would be fighting against a lot when I think about equity in sound healing, because people see sound healers as a very different person than me.
Yes, I can see that, and I want to touch on two
Yeah.
different things.
Okay.
Um, First, you had mentioned this kind of thing of the program being a practicum, and
Yeah.
you kind of getting to design your own program
Yeah.
and what that looks like for you. I want to be able to talk about that, but I also want to bring up something else that you mentioned
Okay.
in terms of a conversation on access. Like the wellness space is a well-known space that's I feel like been around for a while, but gaining access to it, there's a pretty large barrier to entry.
Yeah.
You had mentioned your own personal experience of being in college and not being able to afford access
Yeah.
to go to the meditation space. What would you say, like, what was the process to gaining access to this space now as an adult? And I guess what could other people be able to do to gain access to that?
Yeah, so I think the difference between like now and then is that the access is there, but you have to seek it out.
Mm-hmm.
But there has to be an introduction. So I will say most people don't, when they look at wellness activities, they don't really look at sound healing as a modality of an activity.
Yeah.
They see meditations, or they'll go on TikTok and listen to someone. But even with TikTok and social media, sound healing is still not at the forefront of a practice. A lot of times, if you Google like wellness activities, yoga will be the first thing that pops up, or a workout exercise, Pilates, all of these physical activities, which
Mm-hmm.
is great. And, having physical activity is good at some periods, but that is not the only way to, when you think about holistic well being. And so for me, even the start when I'm working with students is let's start with journaling. We don't need to go extreme to you going to a hot yoga class, paying $40. Even that is really expensive.
Yes.
And so it's like, let's start with journaling. Let's start with something so small as a mindfulness activity. And some of my students that I work with are like, I don't like writing. I'm like, okay, let's do a voice memo. The point of this activity is really to just process your thoughts and feelings. It's not to add extra homework.
Yes.
So I think that's the difference. And when they say like, oh, I started with the voice memo, and then I realized that writing, as I went through the practice, writing felt better for me.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I appreciate about any practice is that you have to have some type of physical aspect of the practice. So if you are doing a voice recording, you're physically talking. If you're writing and journaling, you're physically having to write down. If you're doing a yoga practice, you're physically moving. With sound healing, it's such an interesting concept because you're in a space, but it's not your mind is moving. So it's such a unique experience. Then, when you leave the space, you're kind of like, how did that happen?
Yeah.
How was it that I was physically sitting maybe on a cushion or on your bed, but I went to like 7 different places, and then I came back, and then I left again, and
Yeah.
then I came back. And it's just very interesting how our mind works, but also how powerful your mind can be and move you into different spaces within one practice.
Yeah. I love that, and a part of preparing for this, I watched a documentary, kind of on the practice of sound healing, and it's along the lines of what you're saying of like the kind of everyday life hustle and bustle is like a very different beat
Yeah.
to like what we're naturally in tune to, and when you have something like a sound healing, we could possibly get closer to that natural rhythm or beat that is in us already.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that, and we'll
Okay.
also Arianna have a little a little sound healing session
A little sound at
later.
the end.
So yes, but I want to jump back to this
Okay.
program,
Yeah.
and what can you kind of walk us through what your design was for like your project,
Yeah.
and what it looked like for you to engage in this program and engage in the practice that you want to establish.
Yeah, so my design went through a couple of iterations. And
Right.
so I guess I'll talk about my passion area, and what I still want to do
Mm-hmm.
is to bring meditations and prayer spaces into residential communities or into college campuses. A lot of college campuses have built in practices, or at least a space for prayer and meditation, but it's normally built in through religious life, which is great. But there's students who might not identify with the religious practice at all, might not identify with the spiritual practice. But where's the middle ground between, this is a unique space.
Yeah.
The space that I envision on college campuses are rooms with light walls, lots of greenery, waterfalls, like almost as if you're going to an oasis within this hustle and bustle that you're referring to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the power of space is really important. And we talk about that a lot, even in sound healing. But even I think in a lot of practices, but having a physical space where students can retreat is really important for me more than anything else, because you might not get along with your roommate. You know,
Yes.
you might,
As we both
you
know.
know,
Yes.
you might not get along with, there might be moments where you're having tension with your friends, but any practice is a personal practice. So when people say, "Oh, I like," if you go to church, right? You're showing up to church. You might collectively be together, but the practice and your own thoughts is individual.
Yes.
So when you're breaking down, "Oh, I felt like the pastor's message spoke to me," that's an individual practice that you're having with that person. And it's the same thing when you think about other practices and other religious and spiritual practices. It's an individual journey. That's not to say that you can have a collective with you, but when you're thinking about like depression, anxiety, all of those things are internal pieces, and we mask a lot of things as individuals. And I think also as a Black community member, we show up to spaces when we don't want to, but then when we have to go home, where's our oasis?
Mm.
And for me, sound healing creates that oasis, regardless of where you are in a situation. You could be in the middle of Times Square
Yeah.
and plop on some headphones and let that sound take you to where you need to go. And so that's where I envision something like this would be on college campuses. But my project ended up being a little bit of a shift. And so my goal, I think, throughout my doctoral program has been around the Black community and supporting Black students. Just because, like I said, I came from a space where I didn't really know and have that access to modalities that I needed at that time. I was
Yeah.
an RA, I was a student leader, going through a lot of stress. I also was a transfer student. And so there was a lot of things stacked up against me. And I knew that I needed to get to another degree. I needed to get out of this space. I was coming from South Georgia. So it was just a different environment at the time. And I knew this wasn't my end goal. But it was hard to get to that place. And so if I can create a space for students where, this is just an introductory to your practice. This is not the end all be all. This
Mm-hmm.
is just the start of it. I think it will help a lot of students go through the journey of college. Also, maybe feel like college is more exciting and enjoyable for them. I think that's the biggest piece. You go through
Mm-hmm.
college, you're like, I hate my professors, I hate my roommate, I hate everyone. And so it's like I just want to get in and get out. But it's like those moments in college are so valuable, but also it's a lot of skill building.
Yes.
But where does those skills come from? It's from mentors, it's from professors, it's from other students. But if you don't have those people in place, or you're not seeking that out, you have to do that journey alone. And so having that alone journey is where we go into a lot of anxiety, depression, mental health challenges, because you're like, I might be the only one feeling like this. And if I share it with people, are they going to receive it the way I want to? Are they going to support me in the way I need to be supported? And for me, I'm all big on let's go to therapy. That's great. But when you're outside of therapy practice, what individual practices are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's important.
Yeah.
You're going to therapy, they're giving you homework, or you're talking about, childhood trauma, which is really big. When you leave that space and you're processing those moments, how are you processing those moments? What does your support system look like? And it doesn't need to be family. I think people think that when you're in college, your family is going to be your only support system. No, that's not true. You get a lot of friend support, faculty support, staff support. Like you can build your family how you want it to be. But so long story short, the goal is this meditation and prayer space. But I just don't want people to get discouraged by the name. I want it to be more about this oasis that can take you on this journey. So ideally, the space would be more heavy on sound healing as a practice, just because I think there's now access a lot to YouTube with yoga and other practices that people more have access to. I think a lot more, and I know TikTok also, like I mentioned. So I think for me, it's the introduction of sound healing is just more special, and I think it's something that a lot of people are just now getting into. So I want to kind of do that introduction of like, here's a different modality that you might not have known about. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
think that's great. And I do want to touch on a few points that you
yeah,
had mentioned. One, again, kind of touching back to access. If this was on a college campus, then ideally it's a free space for people to use.
yeah,
And that's a major part of just having access. Um, I hope a college wouldn't charge people to let them in a room, but you never know. But ideally,
Gosh,
it's a free access. You have
yeah,
access to the space that you can come in and kind of talk about what you talked about in terms of like an individual practice.
yeah,
If you want to meditate, if you want to do yoga,
yeah,
however you want to find yourself and be in tune with
yeah,
yourself, you're able to do in a space that is welcoming and like accepting of that.
yeah,
Um, another thing that I wanted to talk about is this. You mentioned talking about people, you could go to church or you could go to whatever holy space it is that you want to go to, but there are a lot of individuals, myself included, who may not want to be in that space or
Yeah.
don't identify with that. So having a practice that is open to all, I
Yeah.
think, is very necessary. Again, because you can meditate, you
Yeah.
can pray, you
Yeah.
can do whatever feels the best for you in this individual sense,
Yeah.
because it is such an individual alignment with kind of whoever you feel most comfortable
Yeah.
to. And I really think I enjoy that about sound healing, at least from what I was been able to research and hear, and
Yeah.
hopefully what we'll hear later
Yeah.
today. But I also have experienced similar things if I do meditate. Or you mentioned voice memos. I'm a voice memo kind of girl. I talk to myself. I
Good.
talk to myself. I'll write stuff down, and
Yeah.
like all these things I think accumulate and like add up into an
Yeah.
overall sense of like wellness and
Yeah.
well-being and how in tune you are with yourself. And I think sound healing is just another almost like addition that you could
Yes.
do to
Hmm.
add to your daily practice
Yeah.
or kind of life practice of how are you in tune with yourself? How are you feeling today? And helping get back to a space of hopefully calm, serenity, peace
Yes.
in a continually like bustling world and society.
Yes. I love that. It's the addition.
It's the addition to possible practices that you
Yeah.
already have. And I do want to ask, like, I mean, we're from the South. I'm from
Yeah.
the South. I grew up in the church,
Yeah.
and I think some people could be afraid to explore this because it
Yeah.
feels or it seems a little bit different from what they may understand or what they may
Yeah.
know. Um, I'm not sure if you grew up in the church, but if you did, or how this kind of process came about, feeling comfortable enough to, let's say, add this on. So let's
Yeah.
not say you have to do sound healing or pray whatever
Yeah.
said religion that you are part of. It could be you could do both.
Yes. So you definitely can do both. I think the other piece, so this is happening a lot around sound healing in general on where does it fit into the mold? Is it a Christian practice? It is a Buddhist practice? Like we're placing sound healing in a mold when that should not be the case. So I'll give you an example. When we think about cultures and prior to the term of sound healing existing, there used to be like jam sessions, or even when I think about our own culture and African culture, like djembe drum sessions.
Hmm.
If you've ever gone to those type of sessions or even sat through or even looked on YouTube, there's a feeling and there's an energy that comes from collectively having this experience. And it doesn't need to be a part of a religion. It doesn't need to be a part of, we're reading scripture and then we're having this practice. And so that's what I appreciate about sound healing. I know yoga has, there's hundreds of articles, I think, on yoga and the spiritual practice of Buddhism being at the forefront of yoga. And I think I have my own thoughts on that as well. But for me, when I think about sound, like even if you're not religious or you are, we hear sounds all day.
Yeah.
So it's not like, you don't need to be in any type of practice to hear sounds. The difference between hearing sounds and sound healing is that the sounds that are tuned for this practice is around the amount of hertz that we're using, but the instruments are all healing instruments.
Hmm.
What I tell people is that any instrument can be healing, it's how the person is facilitating it.
I see.
So I can definitely play piano to you for an hour. You might have a healing practice from that, but all of these instruments that are combined together creates an experience for the individual. And that's where I think the healing piece comes in, but it's not tied to a religion.
Hmm.
So there are instruments that are from Tibet, for instance, Tibet singing bowls, which I have a few of those. I have crystal singing bowls, I have chimes, which I have here today. All of these instruments are from different cultural backgrounds. But I think the blessing that I like about it is that then I'm bringing that culture into a space to then impact the person that's hearing it.
Hmm.
So, for instance, I have a djembe. When I was in South Africa, I was like, I need to buy this. This is something I have to have. And when I bring that into my practice for a lot of my Black students, it's a awakening because it's just something that we know and hear, and it's like, oh, that's different.
Hmm.
Oh, I know this sound, or like
Yeah.
I've heard this before, or I've been in New York City and I've seen drummers with the sound. It brings you back to a place of being comfortable and being familiar. And so for me as a sound healer, I think it would do my process unjust if I just only bring in a cultural instruments from my own culture.
Yeah.
When that, I think, is not how we heal the world. We heal the world with the instruments of the people of the world.
Hmm.
And that's why the practice, I think, is so unique. And that's also why I feel like it's collecting us more than a religious practice, because it's so familiar and the sounds are so unique and different. So yeah, so I think that's, I hear the mixed reviews, and I would be not a great facilitator if I don't be can't stand on the practice and the reasoning behind it. But I think for me, when I'm looking at sound healing as a practice in general, it's not tied to any religion
Hmm.
or any spiritual practice. It's really tied to you as the individual, because it's your journey. So if you're thinking like, okay, I'm going to go in and use this as a prayer space, you can definitely do that. If you're going and saying, I'm using this as a journal space, you can definitely do that. So it's really you as the individual, what you're getting out of it, and how you process in the moment, I think is important. And I've had sessions where people have cried, and it's like, we have to take that moment. I'm like, well, what was going on in those moments? And they were like, one of the instruments, just something triggered,
Mm.
like an energy that I've been holding on to, or a memory that needed to let go. And so, and that's so interesting with sound, because it's, I don't have to have you tell me your deepest darkest secrets.
Yeah.
You as an individual know, yeah, that was deep, or that was what I needed, or that was something that I need to process. And of course, I can be there to help you process that as a facilitator. But also, it's like, it's that journey where I'm like, yeah, you felt something. Let's talk, let's figure that out. And it's like, okay, I need to work on this, or I need to take strides to think about this in my life. And that's what I love about it. It's just no talking, all listening. And we don't do a lot of listening. So
No, the girls can't read.
I
They don't listen no more. They don't do any of this anymore. um, but I really appreciate you kind of bringing this focal point consistently back to the individual
yeah,
in terms of practice of
yeah,
like what works best for you,
yeah,
when do you feel your best, and how all of these things best affect you, or
yeah,
maybe they don't affect you as well. Maybe I try out sound healing and I like the instrument that you played one session, but I don't the other
yeah,
session. And I learn that about
yeah,
myself and I can include that in my
yeah,
practice. I think something like this, again, it's a healing practice, is something that makes us feel better, hopefully, than
hmm,
what we were. And I think that's only something an individual person could really pick up on
hmm,
themselves. And I think I appreciate that the most about sound healing.
yeah. And I think I think the why I got into it is that I didn't feel like, this was an individual practice. Every time I step into a sound healing, it's different. I went to one yesterday. Every facilitator is different. Every time I go to a space, there's different instruments. I love the fact that those, because I'm a sound healer, I can pick up like, oh yeah, she has koshi chimes, or like, oh, we're doing crystal singing bowls
Right.
tonight. So I think that's really cool for me to just know, okay, wow, like we have similar instruments, but it's just played so differently.
Yeah.
And even in my session last night, um, I was like, oh, I have so much to do. Like I was like, oh, I really don't want to go to this class, but I made this commitment. I really want to show up and make sure that, especially as a sound healer of color, I wanted to make sure that I was giving her the respect that was deserved
Hmm.
as someone who's doing this practice. And so I was like, you know what? I'm tired. I'm just gonna go. And it ended up being a great session for me, because I get a lot of joy facilitating, but I get more joy by listening to other facilitators.
Hmm.
It's just so weird, I guess, in a sense. I guess it's kind of like if you're a pianist and you go to go see a concert and you're
Yeah.
like, wow, this is nice to like be in this space. And so it was just nice to sit in the space and not have to think about anything. I'm like, okay, I came in with all these worries and all this to-do list, and it's like my brain was like, no, we're going to sit and we're just going to be calm. And an hour session felt like 10 minutes.
Mm.
And so it was just nice to be like, she's like, how was it? I was like, that was great. I was like, that's what I needed. It was just, I don't need someone to tell me to breathe in and out. I don't need someone to, tell me which poses we're going to do. We're going to do tree pose. I just needed to listen.
Mm.
That was it.
And you're listening to yourself in this session, or in general, is
Yeah.
when
So
you say listen, we're listening to ourselves.
I'm listening to myself. I'm also paying attention to how my body's feeling in that moment. If I'm having pain, I get a lot of tension in my neck. I think a lot of us do, especially with a lot of typing. I noticed that even my knuckles will get tense. And so it's nice to just, as different sounds are being played, of course, as a practitioner, there's different sounds that we can evoke different emotions, right? So when you think about the chakra practice, there are different instruments that are for head chakra versus your feet. So I know that in those moments, those practices are for thinking about those things. And so, but even with the practice yesterday, I came in and I was like, okay, I'm having a lot of neck pain.
Yeah.
But after maybe a minute, I was like, okay, I don't feel my neck pain anymore. But now my feet kind of hurt, or now my arm is kind of hurting. So you're able to process that in the moment of like, okay, all of these, because my neck was hurting so much, I didn't feel these other things happening in my body. And it's important that, which is also why I became vegan. It's important to listen to your body and know when your body's saying like I'm having some challenges or
Yes.
I'm not okay. As individuals, we do it. We might eat something and say, oh, I don't really like that. But when we're thinking about our own practice, we don't do that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's like if I'm thinking about a holistic journey, I have to do it holistically. And that for me is mind, body, and spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it came to my spirit practice, I was like, okay, I have sound healing. We're down. We know we got this on lock. We're good.
Got it on lock.
When it came to my body practice, I was like, I don't even do hardly any movement. It it was like maybe 7 years that I actually did actual stretching, like on the ground, like actual stretching.
Okay.
You know, like if you're doing twisting and something
Right.
at work, but I was like, oh, like I haven't been sitting on the ground stretching like gym class in high
Yeah.
school. And then I realized like, why am I not doing this? You know, like why have I not been building this into my practice? And even I stretched for a whole week, and it was like the best week of my life. Like just taking 5 minutes to just do stretching, I just didn't realize my body needed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was holding a lot of tension in my body that I didn't realize. And so for me, it was like, okay, well, what's the next piece? So I was like, okay, how am I eating? Like, how am I being mindfully around like my eating habits? And it was a point where I was like, I was doing things to just satisfy in the moment. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I really want this cake and I'm going to eat it. And I don't care.
I support that, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm sorry.
But
I'm
there's some
tired.
moments that you
Yeah.
need the cake and want the cake. But then
Yeah.
there's some moments where it's like, I don't even know why I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm just like, when I read a book about mindful eating, I was like, oh gosh, there's going to be another book on like chewing 30 times and like, drinking water before you eat a meal. Like, I
Right.
was like, okay, I just don't want to hear this. But then after like actively doing mindful eating, I was like, okay, when the first chapter was like the textures of food, I was like, I can't even tell you a lot of times the textures of the food because I'm in and out. It's like I have 30 minutes or 45 minutes to eat and I have to go. Or I have this activity or sound healing, whatever it is. I just have to eat quickly and go. And so when I took, and this actually happened during
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic, I think for a lot of us was a space of calm and silence to not only think about what's happening in the world, but what's happening with each other and yourself. And
Yeah.
so for me, I took that moment to be, why have I not started this practice? Number one, but I had never felt textures of food. Like I can never sit there and be like, okay, I'm eating a strawberry. I'm feeling the seeds. I'm feeling the skin. Like I never appreciated food in that way of being not just only nutritious, but also having textures to my palate.
Yeah.
And when I broke it down like that, I was like, okay, I've never tried veganism. This is always something I wanted to do. I also didn't eat beef or pork prior to this because
Okay.
I grew up in a family that my mom had her gallbladder out, and so there was like family things of like, okay, if you can't eat it, then we're not eating it.
Right.
So I was like, okay, well let me try this. So for me, it was getting rid of. We only ate turkey for Thanksgiving, so it was really getting rid of chicken, which was hard. It was definitely hard.
We're from Atlanta.
It was
We
definitely
got chicken wings.
exactly. So that was hard. There was a couple of tears of just like what is happening right now?
I'm gonna take you to ATL wings here after now.
The little lemon pepper,
Oh,
a little
honey
hot
barbecue.
wing, and I've never been a flat hot wing girl, so I've always been a leg girl. And so the leg has the most meat on it. So that was hard to get rid of. And even to this day, like I'll see people eating chicken wings, and I've now gotten to a place where I'm like, okay, I'm good, but it took a while to get there.
Yes,
Or
I
even
understand.
just like fried chicken, the texture of fried chicken. You know, like I'm like a skin girl. Well, I was, right? A skin girl. So
Right.
I'm like, okay, skin off, then I'll eat everything else. So I'm like, I need the crunch. I need to the grease to hit my lips. Like
Yes,
I need all of
it's
that.
the sound, it's the noise,
Exactly.
it's like
I
all of
need it
it.
all. I need
Yes,
the napkin after. I want to look like I have lip gloss on from
exactly.
eating. That is what I wanted. But that was not what my body wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out also that I had I don't think I was been formally diagnosed with having lactose intolerance, but I
Mm-hmm.
knew that milk never sit well with me.
Yes.
So I knew, okay, well, I love fried chicken, but a lot of it is being battered in buttermilk. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, the chicken part I seem really good at, but then when I'm eating the skin, I'm not feeling too great.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, well, let me just try. I just went cold turkey, no pun intended. But I just was like, Monday, like the Sunday night, I ate like rotisserie chicken. Monday, I was like, rotisserie chicken go in the trash. I'm vegan today,
That's
and that's how it
crazy.
started. And that we're now 3 years in, and I haven't looked back. Like I feel like I have a lot of energy. I feel like when I see chicken, I'm not triggered by it. Before, I think maybe the first year I was like, oh man,
Not
they're
trigger.
eating, they're eating that. It looks
Right.
so good, barbecue sauce. But now I'm like, and then I've been more creative with meals, which I think is great. And then I started following TikTokers like Tabitha Brown and all of these other folks that started their vegan journeys and now have all of these businesses and things like that. So I think when I'm in a space now, I think if you asked me like 5 years ago, I would have been like, absolutely not, I'm not going vegan. I can never give this up. But because I went on my own personal journey and I needed to take that time for myself, also to think about my own wellness, it was okay. Why am I not doing this?
Yeah.
And also, there's no harm in trying.
Yes.
So that was me. I was like, okay, if I try for 30 days, it doesn't work out. I mean, that's it. I had a lot of beans and rice that first because that's all I thought. I'm like, what am I actually eating as a vegan? And I didn't do enough research the first month, so I was literally eating like pinto beans,
Oof.
rice, green beans, and broccoli, and some fruit. And then I realized, okay, there is more to this. There's so many restaurants that have vegan friendly options that I
Mm-hmm.
never tapped into. But now, as a 3 years in, I'm like, oh yeah, this is great. So I think it just took that journey, but I definitely have more energy. I feel like when I show up to spaces, I'm not having that lethargic, practice of like, oh, I just had this big meal and I can't really do anything because that was me before, for sure. I would like have a meal for lunch and then I would sit in sound healing and be like, oh my gosh, like I'm bloated. I can't really think. I can't do anything. And I just have more clarity now. So I think but it took me to get to that place. It took
Mm-hmm.
me to take that stance. And so I always say you have to empower yourself first before, it's like when you're on an airplane, oxygen mask on you first before you can help others. If you're not having your own practice, whether that's stretching, meditation, yoga, sound healing, something, you can't really give to others. And that shows up in your relationships, that shows up in your work relationships, your work life. That shows up when you're on the street and how you show up when you're driving and how you're being, you know, uh, moving in and out of lanes and how you're respecting others outside of that space. Like it shows up in everything that you do. I will say I'm not like this huge yogi and zen person. Like there's moments where I have frustration and there's moments that I need to, bounce back and like and
Yes.
have some of those moments.
Right.
So I'm definitely not that person. I'm not like smoking weed and doing all of those things. Like that's not in my practice. And that's some people's practice, which is great. But for me, it was like I can take this and do it my way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to do it the way you see it. I don't have to wear certain outfits to be presented into different spaces. Like I can wear my Louboutins and still show up to do a sound healing. Like there's not a look, there's not a feeling, there's not, you could do what you want to do with this practice. And that's how I feel like I've owned it in a way because people say, oh my God, you're a sound healer. I'm like, yeah. Oh, you just don't traditionally look like a sound healer or you don't act like a sound healer or you and I'm like, yeah, well, as Black people, we hear this a lot. So,
Okay.
but I still show up and I still do it. So it's like, you saying that is not making me fearful. You're actually empowering me to continue doing it, because then I can show other people that you don't have to look like this to fit into the mold of what this industry thinks as a sound healer, and what this industry thinks as even a yoga practitioner.
Yeah.
And so what I even love about what I'm seeing now on mainstream media is that there's women who don't look like a size 2 that's doing practice of yoga. So it's telling you that you don't need to be this type of weight or this type of person to do this practice. But it took what, 30 years, 50 years? I mean,
Too
it took a
long.
long time for us to get to this place.
Yeah.
But even that they're in this space, they're still hit with, are you good enough? Are you, are you respecting the community? And that's even things that I'm being hit with. It's like, what is this practice? How long have you been doing? It's like we have to go through a full resume to like prove ourselves. And it's like my work can speak for itself. Why don't you just, how about you just join me? That's it. Just join me. And we can just go from there. And what I love also about sound healing is that if you go to Spotify playlist and look at sound healing, you don't know who the sound healer is. You don't see their face, you don't hear their voice. And if I, this is on my to-do list for life, but I want to have a playlist for students particularly, as an introduction to sound healing, just giving them a couple of instruments and just kind of working through that. But because you don't know who I am, you don't show up with a bias. And I think even when you go to practice, even as an individual, even when you think about a therapist, you show up with, is this person going to be able to receive my story or my experience? But with sound healing, you don't need that. You show up as yourself and you let the practice do what it needs to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to touch on a few things.
Okay. That was a lot.
I want to be very clear. This is not a vegan sponsorship video.
Oh gosh.
Jalen eats chicken, beef, pork, any and all kind of meats that are available out there to me. I just want to make that very clear.
But I'll take all the vegan sponsors.
She'll take that, but if someone, some meat somewhere, I'll eat it. I promise. I'm a chicken wing kind of girl. But what you're basically talking about, or what it feels like, is you assess yourself, like you said, mind, body, and spirit, and looked at each aspect of your life and how each of them collide and collaborate with each other to make you feel the best that you can feel. And you looked at your food, like you said, and you looked at your mind and your spirituality, like all these things collide. And sound healing is, again, an addition to all these things that are already kind of happening with you and how you're assessing yourself. And I feel like I've done a little bit of that work, and we'll talk after this so I can finish the work. But just like,
well, it's continuous.
It's continuous. I need to start a little bit better because I'll eat a good meal, a good meal, and be tired after, and then eat another good meal the next day, and be like, maybe I should have done that. But anyway,
it's with growth. It's with growth.
Right, it's with growth. And I think again it's beautiful, like recognizing yourself and being able to do this. And I think for maybe some of us or some people, it could be difficult again if you're kind of hustling and bustling and always on the go. You have 30 minutes to eat. You don't have time to think about what this feels like, what it tastes like, how you feel after, because you have to nourish your body to keep doing whatever you have to do afterwards. So this practice of sound healing, it helps you kind of reattune yourself and start, like you said, listening to yourself, your mind, and your body, and being like, what's going on with me, so I can actively make changes to make myself feel better. And I really do love that, and I appreciate that. And it's something as simple as, like you said, listening on a Spotify playlist, or hopefully, in the future, being able to play with it yourself, not play with it, but play with the instruments yourselves and learn about these things because it's meaningful. And again, it's an addition to what you're already doing. None of this feels like I'm taking away, or I'm having to do something that goes out of my way. This is hearing from you and the research that I've done myself. All of this feels like, how can I make you better? And how can I make you feel better? And shit, we all want to fucking feel better. In a world that so much is happening all the time, all we want to do is just feel the best that we can. And I also appreciated the fact that you mentioned you're not like this, just like Zen, like, I'm just on planet Z. And personally, those people annoy me a little bit. But I mean, I respect the feeling of wanting to feel grounded and, worldly about things, but you still have to feel grounded. You're a human being, Arianna. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be upset. And these things are going to happen. But hopefully with all of these, things that you put into your practice, they help it. So it's not as drastic, or it's not as bad if you are frustrated or angry or whatever. because these are normal human emotions. And maybe not experiencing them as much or about certain things, like you're saying, this is where it helps.
Yeah.
I'm still gonna cuss somebody out every once in a while, and it's gonna
And
happen.
it might need to happen.
It might need to happen.
Yes,
I
that's
could be
okay.
as healed as sound can
Yeah.
give me, and someone is still gonna get cussed out.
Yes.
Not all the time, maybe not as frequently. Right. But it helps.
It does. It helps with your release, number one.
Yes.
And number two, you're taking your power, you're taking it back.
Right.
You're not letting them hold power over you, and that's okay. So if a curse out happens, if whatever happens needs to happen, it's because it needs to happen.
Exactly.
So that's the biggest piece.
And I'm glad we agree on that.
Yes.
It doesn't make you less of, a healed person or less. It doesn't take away from the journey that you have. And that was just one example of cussing somebody out. That's not necessarily the truth, but or not necessarily the only thing. But maybe you eat something one day and you're like, I don't feel the best, or maybe you have a practice that isn't the best, or you don't feel the best afterwards. None of these things diminish the journey that you're going on because it's continuous.
Yeah.
You are years into this and you're still learning about yourself,
100%.
I'm assuming.
I'm learning about myself. I'm learning about how I show up in spaces to other people. Like there's moments where I definitely want to curse people out, for sure.
Yeah.
And then I look and say, is the power that you have over me important for me to do that? Because that's more important for me, is that I hold the power from myself, but you take the power from me because you want a reaction. So for me, I've gotten to a place, and this took a long time.
Who are your victims? No, I'm kidding.
Long time. I mean, I went through a lot. I had supervisors that were challenging, and I learned a lot about myself, and also like I'm an only child, and so I have friends who have that support system of calling their sister or their brother or their sibling. And for me, it's like I'm calling my parents, and they're like giving me advice, but the advice is what they know only. It's kind of like, well, you have to respect your supervisors, or you have to respect your elders. Like these are all customs, of course, coming from the South. But I'm also like, no, like this is wrong.
Yeah.
Like there's things that's happening to me that I know is wrong. And unfortunately, where is the space to say this is happening to me? And so for me, leaving New York and coming to LA was because of those moments of like, I have to get out. Like I saw myself going into a space I didn't want to be in. It was days and days. It was like, I think like 14 days or 15 days of just like, why? I just kept questioning, like, I was questioning a lot. Like I was questioning God of like, why am I here? I was questioning like, why is this person involved in my life in this way? What is not so much what is the purpose, but like, why is it that I feel like I've done everything quote unquote right, and this is my first adversity in life, and there's nothing I can do about it. I can't change this person. I can't change anything about what's happening, but I can change myself, which is why I think the blessing of sound healing came at the perfect moment, because I didn't know what the outlet was. Everyone's like, oh, well, is it that bad? Or, when you, especially as a Black person in spaces, your voice gets diminished.
Yes.
And eventually it gets to a point where you start questioning, is it even that bad? So we as a culture and as a community go through trauma, and then we get gaslit with is it that bad? And when I hear that, I just want to slap someone. Just be like, are you kidding me? Like, why would I share it with you for you to then respond with, is it that bad? Like, that's insulting my intelligence, number one, and insulting, like, I'm trying to respect you as a person, coming to you, asking for assistance, asking for help, and you're literally like, is it that bad? So I knew from that day, I was like, no. And even in my own practice as a student affairs professional, when people come to experiences and say, this is what I experienced, I don't come with, is it that bad? I come with, I'm sure that did happen to you. I'm 100% sure it happened to you, because you wouldn't come to me to tell me something that wouldn't. Because we don't, A, want to waste people's time, but B, a lot of times when people are asking for help, they do it in a subtle way of like, hey, this experience happened to me. What would you do in this situation? Or how would you react? And that is the prime example of them saying help, especially when it comes to Black cultures. A lot of times we don't come and be like, Jalen, we need help. Like, that's just not who we are. We haven't been, raised in that culture of seeking help when we need it, but we've raised in a culture of talking about trauma, and we do it daily. So it's like when I hear students coming to me saying traumatic experiences, I'm associating that with you're needing help. So let me figure out how I can help you, because you're not going to explicitly say I need help, but you are sharing a story with me that you're traumatized by, and it's bringing up emotions that you probably don't know how to process, or if you do know how to process it, what is next steps after processing, because you still have to go back into that experience over and over and over again. And so I knew that if I could do anything, at least I can impact the people that I'm directly supervising in that way. And I think the biggest piece is just A, listening, but B, acknowledging the fact that the experience happened.
Yeah.
I can listen to you and be like, okay, thanks, Jalen, bye. Like, we're done. But it's
Yeah.
like, no, you have to acknowledge, like, Jalen, you shared that with me. Like, I appreciate you, A, sharing it with me, but B, like, what do you need in this situation to move forward?
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you need an official apology from this person? Do you need support as you go and seek different resources? Like, what do you need in that moment? Because it's important that you seek the things that you need to grow as an individual. But I didn't have that. When I was 22, 23, I was going through this and hearing from elders, and I think they were giving me what they knew as a culture. They knew that, we all go through this. You're going to have these moments. And that's all they knew. But for us as this next generation, and as we're thinking about, these future youth and students coming behind us, it's like we have to be the ones to share those resources. And they will hear from us, and they will from their own parents.
Yeah.
And even for me, like, I hear from TikTok and YouTube and social media in general, and then I go and be like, okay, mom, how do you feel about this? And then I kind of compare, like, oh, okay, well, your thoughts was this, but I learned this.
Yeah.
But and that's okay, because at the end of the day, you only know what you're exposed to. And as I've been in this practice, I've been exposing my family to this practice, and they
Mm-hmm.
have been exposing others to this practice. So it's been a collective approach, because once you have exposure, you can't get rid of the exposure.
No.
That's it could be a blessing or a curse. You're going to have it regardless. And exposure and exposure.
Yeah.
And it's important that when you have these moments to be like, oh, I did this really cool thing, I should share it with you. Or like my dad always says, oh, my daughter's doing this thing in California with sound, and so people are like, oh my gosh, we want to learn more about it. He's like, oh yeah, I'll send you a video, I'll share this. And my mom does the same thing. And then for them, it's like when they share it, it then gets shared again
Yeah.
and again. And that's the important piece, is that it's kind of like this grassroots initiative, which is how we started as a collective for Black culture. We didn't have social media when we were marching and we are talking about equity and inclusion. We had each other, and we had the talk.
Yeah.
It's
Word
like,
of mouth.
exactly, that's it. And
Yeah.
it starts with word of mouth, from just grassroots,
Yeah.
and that's important. So
I do want to touch on the fact we talked about like kind of being gaslit,
yeah,
and especially you being a Black woman, that experience is even worse than
yeah,
someone like me being a Black male,
yeah,
because you are a woman, and how people try to invalidate your experience and
yeah,
or question it. And I do kind of want to tie it back a little bit to the practice of sound healing or overall wellness, because you say like you start to question yourself of,
yeah,
is it that bad, or is this experience happening? And I think, and I'm gonna have to look into this and talk to myself about this, of like, do we do that with our own bodies? As
yeah,
if we're experiencing something that may not feel great,
yeah,
are we questioning ourselves of, is this that bad? Am I eating something?
yeah,
Is it that bad that I can't do it anymore? Or if I'm hearing something, or if I'm doing
yeah,
something, is it that bad? And my hypothesis is that we do something similar to our bodies.
yeah,
Again, I'm not trying to compare it to your experience of being like invalidated of your because you're a woman and because you're Black.
yeah.
Um, but I think it's a similar thing that we
Oh,
could possibly
100%.
do to our bodies.
Yeah,
But I also love the fact that we talk about like, it's this word of mouth thing. Is like, your parents may not have known, or let's say their toolbox
yeah,
wasn't as expanded as
yeah,
ours, but as a generation now, we have so much more access to knowledge and materials. And I feel like I have a similar experience of like, there are some things I'm not gonna ask my parents about. I'm not gonna ask my family about, because
yeah,
they're not the best resource to go
yeah,
to, and
yeah,
they're gonna tell me what they know, and what they know just may not be applicable to me.
yeah,
So having something like, okay, maybe I'm not feeling that great. Maybe I'm asking myself why or what's going on, and I'm just not understanding. Maybe sound healing is the best practice for me, but I just didn't know about it.
yeah,
And now I'm gonna get to learn about it, because your dad, share it with your aunt, share it with your cousin, who share it with my cousin's
yeah,
baby mama, and
yes,
ignore that. But but
But it's true.
it's true. Like it's a like a network
It
that it
is.
expands
It
out.
is.
And of course, all Black people are not a monolith, but this is just one way that
Yeah.
information is passed
Yeah.
amongst a community. And I love the fact that this is how it's done.
Yeah.
I knew about I knew about sound healing and meditation and yoga and all these sorts of things before. Funny enough, when I got to college and
Yeah.
took a class and learned about it, so I was slightly familiar. And then you and I started to talk about it. I'm like, okay, I'm doing my own research.
Yeah.
This is something that I might want to practice
Yeah.
myself. And if I hear or someone else around me sees me doing it, then they might explore it
Yeah.
more. And it's this kind of continuous motion of sharing knowledge and information that we have. And in this way, it's one, it's free and it's
Yeah.
accessible to most people.
Yeah.
Again, talking about this like barrier to entry and the entry point into getting here, talking is free,
I know.
but listening is freer. And I know that's not a word, but listening is freer.
Yeah.
Listening to yourself, listening
Yeah.
to your body, listening to how you
Yeah.
feel is so important. And this, again, for the 20th time, it's just one way that you can do it. And it's just an addition to what you're already doing in your
Yeah.
practice. So last question, Ariana.
Okay.
I you talked a little bit about it, but I want to know how you implement this in your daily life. Are you I know you attend your own sound healing
Yeah.
sessions and you're a practitioner, but do you have your own maybe meditation or something that you do every day, every morning?
So, yes. So every morning I try to start with some type of grounding activity. So whether that's like stretching, sometimes it's stretching standing up, coming out of bed, or just stretching in bed. Just I think putting myself back into the space on earth, I think is important. So when you're sleeping, of course, your mind and your body is in a different place. But when people say, being grounded, it's important. So there's energy that's underneath us. So when you go out to nature and just take your shoes off and put your feet into the ground, there is an energy source underneath all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we are, as humans, have energy that we're bringing into spaces. And so for me, I just like to bring energy into my daily practice and my morning practice with waking my nervous system up with stretching.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's important to be like, okay, how am I feeling? Oh, I have a crick in my neck. Oh my gosh. Okay. So clearly I slept wrong last night. And a lot of things that I'm noticing is that if I'm having a stressful moment before I go to bed, I wake up still with the impact of stress.
Mm, yeah.
Even though I say, oh, that nap was great, or, I had a great night rest, but my physical body still reacts to stress. And we do that in a lot of practice. So when you mention masking signs and symptoms, that's true. That's not a fictional sense.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of research where, especially when you're looking at cancer research, on people saying, "Oh, I felt something wrong," or I had this lump, but I kind of, it was small. I didn't really think anything of it, and then ends up being cancer or breast cancer, or some type of cancer. And a lot of times we mask some of those things because we're not in tune with our body, because our body is on its own kind of orbit in a sense. We're moving so quickly and we're doing things so fast, and we have to send this email out, and our boss needs this deadline, that we don't even have enough time to just sit. And so that's why, when we're thinking about your own practice and your own living, it's important to think about that sitting piece. But I'm glad that you brought that up, because a lot of people now, when you're thinking about sound, they're like, oh, well, you know, how does this feel? Or, how does it actually relate to my body? It's like you're masking probably a lot of things that you
Yeah.
didn't realize until we uncover it. But yes, I do sound healings every single day. I'm also adding more instruments into my, I would say, my toolkit in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
For me, when I'm doing a sound healing, I like to know who my audience is before I come. So that's important for me as a facilitator, to know, is this entry level where no one in the space has ever done this,
Mm-hmm.
or are there folks that maybe have dibbled and dabbled into the practice but really didn't feel like comfortable. So for me, the introductory, I think, with sound, which we'll probably play some chimes today, is ocean sounds and water-based instruments. So that could be ocean drums, koshi chimes, which is one. I have two of them here. Um, any type of sound that relates, rain stick, that relates to things that we hear naturally, but we're not in tune to it.
I see.
So like we could be in a space and it's like, oh, it's raining. I hate the rain, or I gotta get out and do all this stuff. But have you ever sat and listened to rain hit a car or side of a building? Probably not. And so I'm able to bring that practice to you. And then you're like, huh, this is quite beautiful. Who would have known this annoying wet thing coming out the sky would be so precious?
Yeah.
And you appreciate life more. And I think you appreciate being you more.
Mm.
Because you appreciate, like, okay, I'm here for a purpose, I'm here for a reason, and I'm amongst people for a reason, I'm meeting people for a reason. We're all on this journey together, but we're all interconnected some way. And sometimes there's people I meet today that I know will meet, something will happen in the future that will connect again. And so I always say, the energy that you leave with someone is important, but
Mhm.
also the energy that they leave on you is more important,
Mm.
because you're able to take that energy and not give it back to them, but process it.
Yeah.
So when you're having those negative moments, or someone is coming to you, with disrespect, it's like, okay, that's the energy that they gave to you. You can hold on to that, but just know that you have the power to process it how you want to. You can curse someone out. You can be as calm as a cucumber,
Mm-hmm.
but also it's like, why is this person doing this to me? Versus I need to attack them because they attacked me.
Yeah.
So it's just a little bit different. But yeah, so that's my daily practice. But yoga is not really my favorite, I think. Like,
No.
I think I have a hard time doing a lot of the poses in general. I'm not like the limber girl. So I think, and everything with practice.
Yeah.
But for me, it's just like just stretching, getting on my tippy toes, just getting on the ground, just doing kind of those basic elementary stretches is important for me. But also ending my day with some type of journal or voice memo or something is important to go to bed, because I know when I miss those moments, when I wake up, I'm like, yeah, I missed it. Because
Yeah.
when your body's so used to having a practice, it's kind of like with runners. When you run every single day and you stop running, your body's like, what's happening?
Yeah.
It's the same thing when you think about mindfulness practice. Like when you get into a routine and you take it off, your body's like, what's happening? Why are we doing this? What's going on? Are we ill? Are we, like, what is happening? And then it's like, okay, this is why this is a part of my regimen now that I have to include.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Arianna, and thank you for explaining all of this and teaching us and walking us through this. I think this is a fascinating world that a lot of people, again, don't know about, but hopefully through this conversation and the conversations that I'll have and that you'll have and everyone else and the networks
Yeah.
and everyone will connect and we'll be able to talk about these things and people can add them to this.
Thank you for listening to our latest episode. Please be sure to check out jaysconversations.com for more discussion questions, the reading materials, and of course to learn more about our phenomenal guest. And also, if you enjoyed what you heard today, please feel free to subscribe to our newsletter and give us a follow on Instagram at Jay's Conversations. I'll see you next time.
Conversations with Jay.